Wildfire season picks up in the West. The president of Brazil in the hospital for hiccups, and the beginning of the end of the Britney Spears conservatorship saga. Thursday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Thursday, July 15th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
This summer's really trucking along, huh?
It
July
is,
15th,
yeah.
It's weird when you, maybe it's just me, but I don't know if you felt this way when you had a baby, but it's like the weeks go so slowly, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what? She's 6 weeks old already? How did that happen?
There's an expression, it's the days are long, the years are short.
Yeah, that's really true.
Big reminder,
by the way,
tomorrow.
Yes. No, sorry, go ahead, Jill. I was just going to do that reminder.
No, you do it.
You can tell we're very prepared this morning, as always. No, I was just going to remind everybody, tomorrow, Friday, we're going to be on YouTube, 9 a.m. Eastern time. You can live chat with us. Watch the pod, youtube.com/Cheddar now.
It's going to be interesting to watch it in real time, and we could comment on it. And I feel like we'll kind of be making fun of each other a little bit, and ourselves.
Yeah. Well, Jill, I mean, you're a pro as being on camera. I hate watching myself on camera. I just can't stand it.
If nobody joins, at least it'll just be us, kind of like. Well, I feel like we'll be able to be like, "Oh, good point, Carlo. Oh, stupid point, whatever." It'll be fun. Okay, let's get to the news here. I feel like we're doing a lot of dilly-dallying. The bootleg fire in Oregon, currently the largest in the United States, with 200,000 acres burned and counting. Firefighters on the front line say they have never seen a fire move so quickly so early in the season. There have already been 67 large fires across the parched West this year. They burned close to 1 million acres, and it is only the middle of July.
In Northern California, the Dixie Fire, keep an eye on this one, broke out near the site of the deadliest wildfire in recent history that destroyed that town of Paradise, if you remember, back in 2018. This blaze 0% contained. Residents are being told to prepare to leave at a moment's notice. The good news is it's moving away from homes. This drought, Jill, it's really something. I don't know if you've seen these pictures from Lake Mead and the bathtub rings that they call it, I guess like the salt deposits. That reservoir, it powers the Hoover Dam, and it's now 35% full and falling. It provides the water supply for 40 million people in this country.
Lake Mead at its lowest level, actually, in almost 100 years. I was listening to an interview with firefighters in the region. They say they are now training to fight fires overnight because it's too hot during the day. Like they just can't, They can't physically do it.
Yeah, those guys and women, I mean, talk about like just heroes, right? Having to do this year in and year out. I mean, it's amazing.
I have a long family history of firefighters, actually, in New York. My grandfather was a firefighter. Yeah, he actually died really young of emphysema because back in the day, they didn't really wear the protection. So they just were going into
FDNY?
Yeah, he was a fire a chief in the fire department. And so was my one uncle, and another uncle was in the fire department, too.
That's crazy. You know, my father was also. He wasn't a firefighter, but he was in the like in the front office, I guess you'd say, back in the day. We'll have to talk about that online.
And the other crazy thing is that on Long Island and a lot of places, the fire departments are just volunteers. And they're wonderful.
Same where I grew up.
But it's just all volunteers, which I didn't realize when I was a kid, and I learned about that when I was a reporter for News 12. Anyway, we go on. Scientists, by the way, say that for the first time, the Amazon rainforest now emitting more CO2 than it absorbs. The Amazon has been a carbon sink for all of human history, sucking up a lot of greenhouse gases that are driving climate change. But now, because of fires that are intentionally set in that area to clear land for cattle, the rainforest is actually accelerating global emissions. According to this report, Carlo, we say the Amazon is the Earth's lungs, it's hard to overstate how bad this is here.
Yeah, God, the news has been really depressing lately. I get it, people. I know. This is bad news, and it's quite bad. The good news, though, there is some good news here. The EU yesterday unveiling a major new climate initiative to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 55% this decade. That's an increase from the 40% original goal that the bloc had. The plan includes a ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035, as well as this pretty controversial initiative in which they would tax foreign companies companies for the pollution they cause on the European continent. So that has the makings of a global trade dispute, which I'm sure we will talk more about in the months and years ahead. But big moves here. The EU basically saying to the U.S., if we can do this, you can do this. So we'll see. I don't think the White House has responded yet to see if they're going to up their climate pledges. You know, the climate problem, it's actually really simple when you think about it, right? Anything that emits carbon dioxide needs to be replaced with something that doesn't emit carbon dioxide as quickly as possible. Like that's the guiding principle, decarbonization, right? It's the collective action problem that makes it so frustratingly unsolvable, right? Everybody's got competing interests that end up nullifying the big things that need to be done. I think that's how it in my head, like that's what's so frustrating about it, because we know it has to be done and we have the technology to do it.
Speaking of Brazil, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro admitted to the hospital for chronic hiccups and may need emergency surgery, according to his office. He's reportedly had the hiccups for 10 days. It's not the first health scare for Bolsonaro, who was stabbed during his 2018 campaign and has had several surgeries since.
10 days of hiccups. That's like literally a nightmare. I mean, last summer, by the way, Bolsonaro, he tested positive for COVID, not once, not twice, but 3 times after severely downplaying the virus. He treated himself with that controversial drug, hydroxychloroquine. He's basically a COVID denier, but he's not just a COVID denier. He's also a climate denier. He's opened up the Amazon, the world's greatest rainforest, to mass deforestation, which is why it's now no longer the carbon sink that it was, saying that the rainforest belongs to Brazil and not the world, though it does belong to the world. What happens there affects all of us. Like you said, it's the Earth's lungs, right? So, I mean, this guy, arguably the single most destructive person living on Earth, I would say. So I guess I'm not going to wish him well, to be honest.
A record number of Americans died from drug overdoses last year in the midst of the pandemic. According to the first statistics from the CDC, more than 93,000 people died, mostly from synthetic opioids like fentanyl, for a 30% increase from the prior year. The surge in overdoses the worst in the South and West, although no region of the country was really spared. Only South Dakota and New Hampshire saw ODs actually decline in 2020.
What's of note in this, to me at least, was that deaths spiked during the height of the lockdowns in the spring, which I guess is pretty, we could have guessed that, right? If you're going to do drugs like heroin, it's best to do them with other people, they say, because of the, it's just helpful to have somebody else there if you were to OD. But the interesting thing that there doesn't appear to be a correlation between ODs and states that didn't have severe restrictions. This was really a national epidemic, right? One of the 2 that we faced last year and continue to face.
And speaking of the pandemic, pretty notable new stat here. A new Kaiser Family Foundation poll found that 21% of people who said in January that they would only get vaccinated if required or definitely wouldn't are now vaccinated, suggesting that the worry about the Delta variant could be overcoming some people's vaccine hesitancy. Cases now rising in just about every state, fueled by Delta. Though once again, it's important to note that cases, hospitalizations, and deaths still a tiny fraction of their peak, and the half of Americans fully vaccinated are considered more or less completely protected. The numbers are pretty remarkable, just even in terms of cases that are the number of vaccinated people who are testing positive is still 98% of the cases are people who are unvaccinated.
And the people who are testing positive are almost entirely asymptomatic, or they get like the sniffles, right? You're protected if you're vaccinated. I know we say it every day. Another quick update here. We talked about yesterday about Macron in France, basically mandating vaccines for restaurants and bars and amusement parks and shopping malls. Check this out. In the 48 hours since he did that, 2.2 million people have signed up to get their first shots. What does that tell you, Jill? It tells you that these mandates really work. I mean, at least in France. I guess we can't really, we can't say because we're a different country. We've got a different thing going on here. But I thought that was really notable. Look, we're not going to do that here for whatever reason, right? But I think that if we're not, then you know what we should do is we should really just shame the people who aren't vaccinated into staying out of public spaces, right? You have the choice to not get vaccinated, but you don't have some inalienable right to spread this virus. So stay home.
I don't know how you shame people, though, because I don't think people are going to admit that they're not vaccinated. Look, my dad, I was chatting with him yesterday. One of his friends, not vaccinated. and said to him, like, you know, will you come? My son's performing. Would you be comfortable sitting at a table with us? You know, even though we're not vaccinated. And he's like vocal about not. He's very proud he's not vaccinated. And my dad said, no, sorry, no.
Well,
my dad's like in his 70s and high risk. He's like, absolutely not.
That's the key, I think, right? To your point, because first of all, you're not going to shame people from like the White House podium, right? That's not going to work. But I think that in those sorts of situations, you know, when we're with our families and our friends, I think that could work. I think saying, no, I'm not going to take that risk. Sorry, you have the right to do that, but you don't have the right to come over to my house for dinner then. And
as a total aside, Carlo, I know we're calling these variants by the Greek alphabet now, and this is Delta, which is certainly helpful, and because you don't want to stigmatize certain countries where the Delta variant emerged. But the one downside of that, I think, is that, you know, we forget when you think about the Delta variant, it came about in India. Think about what happened to India. And just kind of how devastating this virus was and still is actually to that country. Yeah. I think it's helpful. Like when I think about, like we say, oh, the Delta variant spreading, but really think about that. Like India was so incredibly affected by this virus, in part because of this variant that spread so quickly. Yeah. I think it's the right move to not call it the Indian variant.
I think it's a good point.
But I think it does, like, sometimes I think we forget how devastating it can be.
I think it's a really good point. I would have no problem calling it the Indian variant. I think that the whole thing about, like, it's racist to, like, talk about the virus, about where it came from, I don't get that at all. I mean, I don't, you know, Trump calling it, like, the Kung flu, obviously that's gross. But, yeah, I mean, it came from China. The India variant, I think you're totally right. I think you're onto something.
From one Delta to, and I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying I think it's important to understand where these viruses came from and just look at the impact that certain variants had in certain places as a warning sign of what could potentially be coming. From one Delta to another, Delta Airlines reported its first quarterly profit since before the pandemic, thanks largely, of course, to the U.S. taxpayers that funded last year's federal airline bailouts. Delta says it expects to be profitable in the second half of 2021 without federal aid as leisure and business travel comes back. CEO Ed Bastian acknowledging that the rebound in air travel has been bumpy, saying call volume higher than it's ever been and hold times expected to remain high until the fall.
Do I get my dividend from Delta? I did help pay for that company to stay afloat, as did you, while thousands of small American businesses went under last year.
You know how I felt about that, by the way. I, from the beginning, was saying I thought that bailout was a little bit ridiculous, especially, but go on. I mean, just especially given that these airlines are going to go back to treating customers so poorly.
Like cattle?
Yeah, exactly. Although hopefully they'll keep the change fees to a minimum, which would be a good thing.
I'm going to guess they won't. For what it's worth, by the way, Bastian, Delta CEO, also expressing frustration with the Biden administration for not opening up the country to international travel from Europe and other places, but mostly Europe, despite, quote, all the science why it's safe. And I got to say, he's got a point there. I mean, the White House, I think, is being really stingy on border restrictions still from certain areas that have good vaccination rates. My in-laws are coming in tonight. Pray for me, Jill. But they're coming to stay with us for a month. I kid, they're great. They're going to be able to meet their granddaughter. It's very exciting. But they had to fly through Serbia to get here because they couldn't come in through the EU.
Not only are they going to meet their granddaughter, Carlo, but do you know how nice it's going to be for you and Becky to have help? You're going to be able to go out for dinner. You're going to be able to get a drink. You might be able to go see a movie.
That's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, like they welcome them with open arms.
Yes.
Any help is good.
And they're great.
Mark Zuckerberg says Facebook will pony up to $1 billion through next year to pay creators on both Facebook and Instagram. The social media company has been trying to catch up in the creator economy after losing ground to YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat. All of those platforms have invested heavily in tools for influencers and ways to reward them for the viral videos that they produce.
Day late and a dollar short here, I think. There was a great piece in the New York Times last weekend about how Facebook sort of lost in these content creator wars. You know, Facebook, if you remember, it used to be where viral videos were sort of hatched, right? You remember the Ice Bucket Challenge back in the day a few years ago for, what was that, for ALS? That all started on Facebook, right? That kind of thing doesn't happen anymore, right? Instagram was the birthplace of influencers. Now it's like a marketing wasteland of influencers. The good stuff is really coming from TikTok and YouTube. So I think it's going to be very hard for Facebook to sort of put that genie back in the bottle, but they're certainly going to try.
It's also aging, right? The kid, I hate to say like the kids, but the kids are on Snapchat or TikTok. Okay, one of the most popular soft drinks in the country getting a look and taste makeover. Coca-Cola says it's tweaking the recipe of Coke Zero to make it taste more like regular Coke, along with a can redesign and a big new marketing push. Coca-Cola Zero Sugar, as it is officially known, is expected to be the soda giant's biggest driver of growth over the coming years.
It's funny when you talk about soda, Jill, as somebody who still claims that she's never drank any soda.
Do you not believe me? I like how you say I claim. Allegedly.
Allegedly never had soda. No, I think it's one of the most interesting, not most interesting things about you, but it's one of my favorite little, little picadillos of yours. Coca-Cola, by the way, taking a little bit of a risk here, messing with this tried and true formula, given the new Coke debacle of the 1980s, which I'm sure if you're listening to this and you're like under the age of 30, you're like, what are you talking about? But ask your parents or Google it. There was this huge thing in the 80s where they tweaked the Coke recipe and everybody like threw a complete fit over it. I have to say, I have become somewhat of a Diet Coke drinker, which I never thought that I would actually admit, but every once in a while I crave a soda, and Diet Coke has become my go-to because at least it doesn't have sugar, although God knows what else is in these diet drinks, right?
Totally. Okay, an update on the Britney Spears saga. A judge has granted Britney's request to hire her own lawyer as she fights to end her conservatorship, so a big win there for her. The pop star once again tearfully addressing the court via video link, accusing her father, Jamie, of conservatorship abuse and demanding that he be removed, saying, I want to press charges for abuse on this conservatorship today, all of it. She called the arrangement, quote, effing cruelty, and then apologized to the judge for using that language.
Big win indeed. Her new lawyer is this guy, Matthew Rosengart. He's a high-profile celebrity attorney, big Hollywood player. He said that his first order of business is pushing out the father, Jamie. So this is really the first step in the unwinding of this whole 13-year saga. Which is great for her. I mean, they have done this poor woman so dirty, I think, over the years. If you're really interested in diving deep into this case, like from the beginning, I really recommend this long piece that was in the New Yorker that I read the other day. I think it was probably from last week, from Ronan Farrow and Gia Tolentino, two great reporters at that magazine. It just shows you, like, one of the problems is that these folks so clearly took advantage of her and this arrangement from Jump Street, even profiting from it. Like, it's really gross. But not all conservatorships or guardianships, as they're known in some states, are bad by definition, right? A lot of the times they protect the elderly and the infirm from abuse or, family members trying to steal from them. The problem is this one case, I think, has set the entire legal case for guardianships back like 100 years probably.
There was a really good take in Reliable Sources, Brian Stelter's newsletter this morning. It was from CNN's A.J. Willingham, who wrote earlier this week that I just think that in terms of the legacy of this whole battle, he writes, Spears' battle is an enduring consequence of the cruelest celebrity gossip era. In the early 2000s, a new breed of bloggers redefined celebrity gossip and set in motion a ruthless media machine that chewed up and spat out any fresh-faced, high-heeled celebrity in its path. Now, scrolling back through popular dirt sites like Perez Hilton, Laney Gossip, and TMZ feels very much like looking back on the cringiest years of a digital adolescence. But when they reigned, no young starlet was safe from the constant churn of upskirts, invasive paparazzi shots, and humiliating headlines. The coverage was caustic and scalding, and thirsty devotees sipped it all down as loyally as a mid-morning latte.
Good quote. It is gross. I mean, especially the thing that really is even grosser is when you have some of these sites and magazines now coming out talking about like, coming out for Britney Spears. It's like, you did this Us magazine, right? Like, maybe if you didn't put her on the cover every week talking about how she was having a nervous breakdown, maybe she wouldn't be in this position.
No, I think that you make a good point. Social media has been, I think, probably a net negative in society, but I guess the one nice thing about it is that it has allowed certain celebrities to control their message a little bit more. I think that's one of the reasons that we don't rely so much on these paparazzi shots, is that we're already inundated. Like the Kardashians, they put it all out there themselves, what's left. So perhaps that's one of the good byproducts, I guess, of social media. But fascinating, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with Britney Spears. Originally, she was requesting that the courthouse, the room be totally clear. So journalists that were in there and fans were like freaking out, and then she changed her mind and said, okay, that they could stay. But look, at least she has a lawyer of her own choosing now. I mean, as we learn about what she's been through for the past decade and then some, it's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And the fact that she had that lawyer that was court appointed who was making more money that she was paying than actually she spent in a year, if that makes sense. I totally butchered what I was trying to say there.
We get it.
You get it. All right.
Okay, Carlo, go prep for the in-laws, clean up a little. And that is what you need to know for Thursday, July 15th.
See you guys mañana.